Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahawashi, Bahasham, Rakahak Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahawashi. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who ruled and teach well. In peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the brother Ra'aya with another video, and I'm going to start it off in Daniel chapter 2, around verse 36 on down. And this is dealing with that statue of a man made of the different metals, from gold all the way down to iron, that King Nebuchadnezzar of the Neo-Babylonian Empire saw in his dream, and that the prophet Daniel interpreted. And these different metals of this statue represented the different heathen kingdoms that would rule before the ushering in of the kingdom of heaven. And I'm just going to read the headers of them because I want to get down to the main point. The interpretation: Babylon, the first kingdom, and that head of gold was the Neo-Babylonian Empire under King Nebuchadnezzar. Medo-Persia and Greece. And then you had the next kingdom, the arms and the breasts of silver, the Medo-Persian Empire. And then after that, the belly and the thighs of brass, which represented the Edomite, Grecian empires. And the biblical Edomites are known as these so-called white people today. Your Americans, British, Europeans, etc., etc. And now we're going down to that fourth kingdom, the legs of iron, which was the ancient pagan Roman Empire. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron. For as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And of course, the ancient pagan Edomite Empire collapsed. But now we're getting into the final heathen kingdom that would be in rulership before the ushering in of the kingdom of heaven, which is an extension of the Roman Empire, the reincarnated Roman Empire. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron. And this is the NATO-EU alliance that the US is a part of. The kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And if you just look at these different Edomite countries in the West, especially the United States of America, it has a lot of the same practices that the ancient pagan Roman Empire had. And the part of iron represents the stronger nations in the reincarnated Roman Empire, such as the US, Britain, France, Germany, while the part of clay represents the weaker nations, which are usually referred to as the pigs, the weaker economic nations: Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. But the part I wanted to hearken in on is where it says, the kingdom shall be divided. We can clearly see that these Western Edomite nations are divided right now. A couple of years ago, you had Britain leave the EU, and then a lot of these European nations are constantly at odds with the US because of all the policies and actions that the US takes, that these European Edomite nations are the ones that feel the blowback from. Look at the refugee crisis that was caused by the Syrian civil war, the Libyan civil war, the war in Afghanistan, for instance. The US might have taken some refugees from those countries, but the majority of them flooded into Europe, which added even more of a economic burden to those countries. And when the US goes to war with these different nations, her European Edomite allies always get dragged into it. And now, with this war in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine, again, It's these European Edomite nations that are feeling the most blowback from it, while the U.S. is gaining the most from it. And what it's ultimately going to lead to is America's European Edomite allies turning against her at some point during World War III to ally themselves with nations like Russia and China. And they're all together going to shoot 200 million nuclear missiles onto the United States of America, turning it into the biblical lake of fire from sea to shining sea, and then a desolate, uninhabitable wasteland afterwards. Verse 42, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong, those stronger nations, and partly broken, those weaker nations, such as the pigs. But I opened up the video with these verses to preface an article on foxnews.com titled, European officials say U.S. is profiting from Ukraine war, call Inflation Reduction Act very worrying. Senior European officials say U.S. selling more gas and at higher prices and selling more weapons amid Ukraine. America's European allies complaining yet again about how U.S. actions are hurting their situation politically and economically, while the U.S. is gaining from it. And again, driving that division in that kingdom of iron and miry clay, those toes. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, and eventually this kingdom shall be completely broken apart. And then after that, that's when that kingdom of heaven is established under the children of Israel, who are known as the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans today, beginning with the elect of the nation of Israel, the Israelites who have woken up back to their identity and have come back to their power, Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai. And as it says in 2 Esdras chapter 6, verse 9, for Esau is the end of the world, or age, this current age of the rulership of the heathen nations, and Jacob, Israel, is the beginning of it that followeth, the age or world to come, the kingdom of heaven. Top European officials have attacked President Biden's actions amid the ongoing war in Ukraine and have even questioned whether the United States remains an ally as gas prices soar and U.S. green energy policies have put Europeans into full-blown panic mode, according to a report. European officials speaking anonymously to Politico accused the U.S. of profiting off of Russian President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine and complained that green subsidies and taxes included in the Inflation Reduction Act have deteriorated relationships between the U.S. and European allies and partners, and that kingdom shall be divided. The fact is, if you look at it soberly, the country that is most profiting from this war is the U.S., because they are selling more gas and at higher prices, and because they are selling more weapons, a senior official told Politico. We are really at a historic juncture, the official added, arguing that U.S. policies have disrupted trade and that high gas prices are turning public opinion against aid for Ukraine, and then ultimately against the United States. You have protests taking place in some parts of Europe against the United States of America. America needs to realize that public opinion is shifting in many EU countries. Among Europe's complaints is that the electric vehicle tax credit included in the Inflation Reduction Act at $369 billion spending and tax law signed by Biden is protectionist and discriminatory because it imposes unfair competition on foreign manufacturers. The Inflation Reduction Act is very worrying, Dutch Trade Minister Leger Schrijnemacher said. the potential impact on the European economy is very big. At the same time, Putin has cut off energy exports to the rest of Europe, which has led EU countries to buy fuel from the US at nearly 4 times the cost. And so the US bullying its allies to put those sanctions and other penalties on Russia over the war in Ukraine is mainly affecting them and putting them in the red, while the US is filling the void with even more expensive gas to sell to the European Union. These factors, combined with record high inflation, the threat of recession, and increased demand for energy as winter approaches, have led European leaders to question whether Biden's administration is aware of the harm the president's policies have inflicted, and best believe they are. But the U.S. really doesn't give a shit about its European allies. Hey, they'll help them when they'll help them during mutually beneficial deals, but at the same time, if the U.S. can position itself in a position to where it comes out better off at the expense of her own allies, they're more than happy to do it without a second thought. Americans, our friends, take decisions which have an economic impact on us, the EU's chief diplomat, Josep Borrell, emphasized to Politico. U.S. officials have deflected blame to Russia. The rise in gas prices in Europe is caused by Putin's invasion of Ukraine and Putin's energy war against Europe, period, a spokesperson for the White House National Security Council told Politico. The White House has also said that American energy exports are helping Europe, taking credit for shoring up energy supplies ahead of winter. Hey, it's like the insurance man burning down your house and then selling you the insurance afterwards because he's the only one that you can afford, because he's caused you to burn bridges with other insurance people out there. The increase in global LNG supplies led by the United States helped European allies and partners get storage levels to an encouraging place ahead of this winter, and we will continue to work with the EU, its members, and other European countries to ensure sufficient supplies will be available for winter and beyond, an NSC official told Fox News. The White House insisted to Fox News that U.S. policies have not undermined or contradicted President Biden's promise to Europe that America is back as a reliable ally, but European officials are not so sure. Real quick, let's go to Daniel chapter 7, start at verse 19. Then I would know the truth of the fourth beast. Again, talking about those legs of iron, the ancient pagan Edomite Roman Empire, which was diverse from all the others. And what made the ancient pagan Roman Edomite Empire diverse from other kingdoms was that they didn't have a king. What did they have? A Senate house, where all those senators would vote on different things. And then you had a consul and a proconsul, which would be like your president and a vice president today. Exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron and his nails of brass, which devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. Verse 20, and of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell. And now we're getting into the beginning stages of the last leg of that fourth beast, those iron toes mixed with miry clay, the reincarnated Roman Empire, that NATO EU alliance that the US is a part of. And I'm going to reread the first part. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, which is speaking of that little horn, the United States of America, which is really the head of this current system right now. Because you notice that whenever the US makes policies or plans, her European allies follow behind it, even to their own detriment. and before whom 3 fell. And this is speaking about the major European players in the New World. Before the United States of America, as you know it today, which began as the 13 colonies, became what it is today. And those 3 that fell is speaking of the British, the French, and the Spanish, which the U.S. had a war against Britain. Of course, the War of 1776. Then you had the Spanish-American War, and there's the French-Indian War. And then what did you see? France selling its final holdings into the U.S. France selling its final holdings in the U.S. to the U.S. with the Louisiana Purchase, which was made by Napoleon Bonaparte. Even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake very great things. And the United States of America is the most ungodly country on the face of the earth. They like to put up that image that they're a fundamental, righteous Christian nation, but look what they push. They heavily push atheism, the theory of evolution. They do everything they can to contradict the Bible. They oppress the children of Israel, the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans in the United States. They show themselves as the people of the book with plantation Christianity, that false image of so-called Jesus Christ. And this is the #1 nation that pushes that alphabet lifestyle, beginning with LG, onto the rest of the planet. Back in June, you had Pride Month, and then recently you had 2 alphabet movies that just utterly failed at the box office. One called Bros, which dealt with 2 sodomites having a relationship, and another one from Disney, of all places, so-called family-friendly company called Strange World, which had a sodomite teenage couple in it, which bombed as well, whose look was more stout than his fellows, more stout or more proud, more arrogant than his fellows. And the U.S. constantly bullying around her European allies, because her European allies, hey, they always tuck tail and eventually give in to the U.S.'s demands and dictates and adventurism abroad. But like I said at the beginning of the video, America's European allies are only going to take it for so long before they eventually just completely turn against the U.S. and ally themselves with America's enemies at some point during World War III to shoot those nuclear missiles onto her. I'm going to reread. Let me see. We are truly at a historic juncture, the official added, arguing that U.S. policies have disrupted trade and that high gas prices are turning public opinion against aid for Ukraine. America needs to realize that public opinion is shifting in many EU countries. But hey, the U.S. has that look that's more stout than his fellows. The U.S. isn't going to take heed until it's too late. There's no possible way our European allies, our lapdogs, would turn against us. We're too big to fail. Yeah, but we'll see about that. The Inflation Reduction Act has changed everything, one EU diplomat told Politico. Is Washington still our ally or not? That's it with this video. But again, and whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. Now I'm going to go to the book of Obadiah, which is an entire book dedicated to you Edomites and your eventual downfall and destruction from this planet as an entire nation. And the header reads, Edom will be humbled. This is Obadiah 1 verse 1. The vision of Obadiah. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh concerning Edom. We have heard a rumor from Yahweh, and an ambassador is sent among the heathen. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle. And that ambassador sent among the heathen are the men of the Lord, the prophets of the Most High, out on the highways and byways preaching this word, as well as putting up video epistles online condemning you Edomites, showing who you are in the scriptures, and showing what your judgment is going to be for your wickedness. And with the men of the Lord pushing that vibration out there, these other nations are starting to wake up to the fact that you Edomites are the root cause of all the problems taking place on the planet right now, especially you Edomites in America. And the main camp that's pushing it is GMS, or Great Millstone, as well as the brothers that come in the spirit of GMS. As we get closer and closer to the end of this age and the ushering in of the age of the Israelites, the kingdom of heaven, and we see that these prophecies are coming to pass, just as our apostles said they would come to pass, we can see that Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai is dealing with GMS, and that we have that doctrine of 100% truth, 144% truth. But now I'm going to jump down to verse 7. All the men of thy confederacy are your allies, such as these European nations have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee, they went to war with you. When you wanted to foment a war between the Ukraine and Russia, they were all for egging the Ukraine on and provoking that war. And then when the war started, when you wanted to put sanctions on Russia, they followed along with it and put those sanctions on Russia, even to their detriment, have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread, because the U.S. sends a lot of money to these European nations for the upkeep of NATO. When Donald Trump was president, he complained heavily about that those European nations didn't hold their end of the bargain or hold their own weight in paying for NATO. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee and prevailed against thee, ultimately turning against you at some point during World War III to ally themselves with nations like Russia and China. There is none understanding in him, and then to ultimately shoot those nuclear missiles onto the U.S. This is Revelation chapter 17, verse 16. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, and the 10 horns represent the EU, or European Union, beginning with the first 10 common markets of the EU, back when it was known as the European Economic Community, which thou sawest upon the beast being NATO. These shall hate the whore, the mother of harlots, the United States of America, which biblically is known as Babylon the Great, that virgin daughter of Babylon, mystery Babylon, again that mother of harlots. These shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. That fire from those 200 million nuclear missiles, which is going to turn this place into the biblical lake of fire from sea to shining sea, and then a desolate, uninhabitable wasteland afterwards. And then when the dust settles, the former United States of America is going to stand as an eternal memorial as to what a wicked kingdom looked like, how not to govern the earth, and what the judgment and punishment was for afflicting the apple of the Most High's eye, the children of Israel, who are again known as you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans today. So that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong. As we can clearly see, we're almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. primarily from the United States of America. That whore. So as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharala, and until next time, Shalom.